Hello everyone, TLSG here, back again with another daily Marvel Snap video. So the peak, the featured location has finally gone away. I know that some people are going to be really upset about it. Some people are really going to be overjoyed that they're not going to be seeing leeches and the Mr. Negative as often. But I think either way, everybody had a very strong opinion about the peak. So this is going to be our first build after that. And it's something that I've been toying with for a little while. Is Devil Dino still good after the nerf or after the change? So initially I wrote it off as Devil Dino at 5 cost feels clunky, but maybe that was a little hasty. Maybe that's not necessarily the case. So what I'm going to do today is we're going to be using a Handsize deck, something that really pushes to maximize your hand size. So it's a Devil Dino collector build that is designed to increase your hand size to the maximum potential. We have a little bit of flavor here in Beast and Arnim Zola. You could replace Arnim Zola with like a Taskmaster. It would do about the same thing, but essentially what those are there for, Beast, so that we can bounce some of our cards back in our hand to continue buffing up Angela, to buff up our collector if it's on the board. A lot of kind of cool uses with Beast here, or if they send us a Green Goblin, we can bounce it back into our hand and then send it back. Just some really cool interaction with Beast. And so then the next kind of flavor is Arnim Zola. So Arnim Zola will be able to either duplicate our Devil Dino, or maybe one of our other strong cards. If for some reason we get a huge Bishop or Angela, it can duplicate that card. Most of the time, it is going to want to target our Devil Dino, but there are edge cases in every scenario. So running through the deck list really quickly. First up, we have Agent 13. She's a great 1-cost card. She gives you a random card in return. She's going to be able to buff up your collector, your Angela, keep your hand size full for your Devil Dino, and she's going to be a cheap card in the process. And then we have Quinjet. Quinjet is going to reduce the cost of the cards that didn't start in our deck by 1. So Agent 13 cards, Cable cards, even Sentinel after it's been played once, it will reduce the cost of those cards. And so then you can really get some combos going and get a lot more value out onto the board. And then we have Angela. Angela is going to be a great kind of mid-range power card. If we stack her lane, she's going to be a 2-cost 7 power. If we can do some cheeky things like bouncing it back with a Beast, we can redirect that power for, at that point, a 1-cost drop, and we can buff it up further. So a lot of flexibility with this card in this list. And then we have Collector. He's going to get stronger for every card that we generate into our hand that didn't start in our deck. So if we bounce cards with Beast, if we use Moon Girl, if we use Sentinel, if we use Nick Fury, Cable, all of those are going to buff up our Collector to a certain degree. And then we have Beast. Beast is going to be able to bounce those cards back into our hand, so we can either use this for locations that maybe we don't want the cards to be maxed out. Maybe we just want to use this to flood the Angela lane a little bit further, continue buffing up our Bishop. Just a lot of really good uses from Beast in this list. It's not something we will drop every single time we draw it, but oftentimes it is going to be advantageous for us to play this on the board. And then we have Cable. Cable is going to steal one of the opponent's cards. This could be potentially good. Maybe we just draw into a card and we hold it, but we are going to get some information on what the opponent is running, what they have, what they don't have anymore from that Cable play. Then we can always potentially bounce this back into our hand with Beast and then redrop it on the board for some additional upside. And then we have Sentinel. Sentinel is going to add another Sentinel to our hand. He's going to be good at kind of rounding out our curve. He's going to be a decent board presence across the board. We're going to be able to play him multiple times throughout the game, especially if we have Quinjet as a way to buff up our collector, keep our hand sizes full for Devil Dino. Just a lot of good usage out of Sentinel in this list. And then we have Bishop. This deck runs a lot of cards, a lot of lower cost cards. So we're going to be playing a lot of cards onto the board pretty consistently. And so Bishop is going to get pretty large from this list, and he will be one of those kind of game defining cards at determining if we can win a location or if we end up losing it. And then we have Moon Girl. Moon Girl is okay. She doesn't feel incredibly strong, but sometimes you are going to be able to kind of position yourself where you can drop her, and then you have 2 Devil Dinos that you can just drop on the board on 5 and then 6. You can buff up your collector further. Maybe you hold this and you drop it on turn 6 to make sure that your hand size is capped out. You just have some decent usage out of the Moon Girl in this list. It's not as strong as it once was. I don't think it will ever be to the point where both Moon Girl and Devil Dino were 3-cost. Those were the glory days, but I think it does have a place. It's not one we will drop every single time, but there are occasions where we want to drop this to maximize our hand size or get another Devil Dino that we can drop. And then we have Devil Dino, the 5-cost card. This guy started at 3-cost, and now he is all the way up to 5-cost. He gets an initial 3 power, so that's essentially 1.5 cards that you no longer have to have. But if you can have 6 cards in your hand, that is going to be a 15 power card. It is easy to kind of scoff at the Devil Dino's potential now because of how far he's kind of come. It was a 3 cost and you could do all of that power onto the board, but even at 5 cost, if we think of our other 5 cost cards, it's something like a Red Skull for 5 cost, 15 power, and that has a pretty bad downside to it. And so Devil Dino is going to be able to reasonably be at that point, if not just a little bit higher, without a huge downside. And then we have Nick Fury. Nick Fury is going to be okay in this list. Sometimes for our last card drop, we're going to want to drop some power onto the board. Nick Fury will allow us to drop a little bit of power while still maintaining a maximum hand size to keep the maximum upside from our Devil Dino, buff up our collector a little bit further. Typically, we won't use the 6 cost cards he generates unless we just draw into a very particular draw line. But most of the time, he's just going to be here to buff up our collector and Devil Dino. And then finally, we have Arnim Zola. Arnim Zola is going to be able to target one of the cards on our board and duplicate it across the other lanes. So this is going to be good for sneaking cards into like a stormed location, into a Sanctum Sanctorum, into those kind of hard to reach locations. Arnim Zola is going to be able to come in and fill that void. So we can drop Devil Dino on one lane. If they kind of try to do some counter plays, as long as we have initiative, we can turn and drop Arnim Zola on the following turn and move it out of harm's way. So a lot of decent usage out of Arnim Zola. We may not drop it every time on the board. Sometimes we're just going to want to put some flat power onto the board in some of those other locations. All right, and so that is the rundown of the deck list. I am going to go ahead and jump into a few games. I hope you guys enjoy. All right, so first up we have Saint Sent. And in our starting hand, we have our Agent 13, we have our Devil Dino, and our Arnim Zola. So we're going to be able to do a decent power play on some of the final turns of the game. I'm going to go ahead and throw Agent 13 onto the board. She's going to generate a random card for us. I want to keep probably this far right lane empty. The Jotunheim's kind of unfortunate there, but I do want to keep this far right lane kind of empty if I can, but I honestly don't think I'm going to be able to. I don't see getting much upside out of playing additional cards into Jotunheim, so actually let's play our Cable into Savage Land for now, and then we'll see what that last location is. If it's something kind of advantageous, then maybe we hold off and we just kind of keep our negative resource into Jotunheim, and we draw their Lockjaw with our Cable, so that's going to be pretty decent. That's going to be a pretty decent play line or drop for us that they're no longer going to have access to. So let's go with a Sentinel into Jotunheim. It feels bad. It feels so bad, but I think it is what it is. I think we try to position our Devil Dino here and here. And I'm curious if Saint Sent's going to play anything this game. We're throwing all this out onto the board and getting nothing in return. And so I'm going to go ahead and throw our Moon Girl into Jotunheim as well. And then we'll go with a Devil Dino into Subterranea. We'll follow that up with an Arnim Zola. And we have a max hand size right now, so we'll be fairly close. Ooh, their Jubilee is unfortunate. They wait 3 full turns to make a decision, and then they end up with a Jubilee. That is enough to retreat, more than likely. It looks like maybe they were running a Mr. Negative. So the Jotunheim play was really unfortunate. Maybe we could have positioned it with the Devil Dino to come up over it, but that's not necessarily the high roll game that we want to see. We did have the resources. I think we would have been able to pull it out, but you never want to see an opponent down in the dumps like a Jubilee Rock. That's probably the worst feeling from a Jubilee that I've ever experienced. Let's go ahead and jump into the next one. All right, so next up we have Lord of Schlim, and the first location is Limbo, so we are going to see a turn 7 here. We're going to go ahead and play our Quinjet. That's going to help us play like Sentinel over and over again. We may get some upside out of maybe a Nick Fury in this game because the cards that he creates will be 5 cost. We'll be able to use it a little bit easier onto the board. I think just overall, we may see some decent usage out of him. So I'm going to go ahead and play our Sentinel into Danger Room. It's not a huge downside if it does get destroyed because we pull that resource back into our hand. It becomes cheaper in the process. And so I don't think we have a lot to worry about with that particular location, even if it does get destroyed. We may play a decent amount of cards there, but that's going to make a potential like Devil Dino into Arnim Zola here difficult. Maybe we do something like an Angela into a Sentinel. We can then... Ooh, we probably should have played Bishop. Bishop's going to be a good like long-term card. Ooh, and they get the successful Lockjaw drop into Danger Room. Interesting. Bishop's going to be a great long-term card, especially if we end up going to turn 7 like Limbo is suggesting. So let's go ahead and play Bishop into the Limbo location. We'll play Sentinel into the Strange Academy. That 1-cost Sentinel is just too hard to pass up. It makes such good usage out of our energy and out of our mana, or out of our energy, that it's just hard to deny it. they get a pretty good upside out of their Jubilee there. So the Jubilee turned into a Chavez and then rotated the Jubilee into a Lady Sif. And so that discards their Infinite. So if they can draw into Ghost Rider by the end of the game, they're going to have an incredible upside. So still no Devil Dino. Let's go ahead and do our Cable and Sentinel. That will buff up our Angela further. It will send them out. And then Cable can maybe steal their... Okay, I was hoping it would steal their Ghost Rider. That way they wouldn't have it available. Oh my gosh, and then we drop 2 cards in Danger Room. And they both get destroyed. Let's see. Let's see if we can get a little bit luckier at some point in the future. They get a White Tiger that will rotate back in. And the White Tiger is what gets destroyed. And it still rotates out a card, but it rotates into Ghost Rider, so they're not going to be able to resummon their Infinite, which is going to be pretty big. Unfortunately, we don't overcome their power in Danger Room. We could. I don't think it's a bad idea, right? Or do we save that for turn 7? Because I don't think they're going to be able to drop all of their cards onto the board. Maybe we save that for turn 7. Maybe this turn we just do something like a Nick Fury into the Limbo lane. We can then do a Magneto over into Strange Academy next turn, or whatever Nick Fury ends up giving us. Give ourselves a decent amount of upside. Let's go ahead and do that. I think that's okay. They snap where I am a little bit worried, but if we can pull even just their Ghost Rider out, we will have 1 additional power over them in Danger Room, which is going to be huge. They use their Jubilee, they pull into a White Tiger, which then generates a Tiger token. Oh my gosh, if they can play both of these cards here, we're going to be in a decent amount of trouble. So we generate another Magneto. Interesting. That's pretty neato. We're going to go ahead and play Sentinel and Bishop. That will buff us up above this power level. As long as they don't play 2 cards here, we win. Not confident enough to snap, but confident enough to stay in for 4 cubes. Because all we need to do is pull 1 card over, so they can play 1 card here, can be the biggest card in the world. As long as they don't max this one out, we are going to be just fine. So they do an Odin, which will pull nothing with their Jubilee because they're out of cards in their deck. So that comes down to our Cable play, right? Our Cable stole 1 card from their deck list, otherwise they'd have 1 left in it. And so it feels so nice when it kind of comes together. Even if we had put our Sentinel here, we had enough power to overcome at this power level. And had we turned first, their White Tiger would have actually put a 7 power token here. But since they had initiative going into that last turn, they didn't get that upside from the Odin, thankfully. And we were able to pull out the win. All right, so next up we have Safety Blade. The first location is Nova Roma, so we draw into an additional card. We have our Angela, Cable, Sentinel, we have Devil Dino, so we have some decent resources here. And we draw into Moon Girl, so if we can play these in order, so we can play our Angela, we can play maybe a Cable, a Sentinel, that will leave Devil Dino as the first card that gets multiplied or duplicated from Moon Girl. So we can kind of manipulate that Devil Dino to make sure that even if we don't have space for all of the cards to get duplicated, we can guarantee that Devil Dino will. So they play a Calling Wing. We have our Angela. I think this turn we go ahead and play both our Cable and our Quinjet. And I'm going to play Quinjet into Wakanda. We'll play Cable onto the Angela. We want to kind of buff her up at least a little bit here. If we draw into a Beast, that's great. We can pull back into those cards, buff her up further. Otherwise, maybe we leave 1 spot open for a potential Devil Dino. And what we don't want to do is rely on our Devil Dino into Wakanda, because the Arnim Zola Wakanda interaction is no longer going to work. If the card cannot be destroyed, it won't work. It won't work properly anyways. So we pull into their Apocalypse, which is so unfortunate for them. It's good for us, but unfortunate for them. I'm going to go ahead and play our Collector into Wakanda so that he can get buffed up over time. We will play a Sentinel to pull back into a card, start buffing up our Collector, and we position our Devil Dino in a way that if we wanted to duplicate it, we could. But more than likely, we're just going to play our Devil Dino into Nova Roma after the Bifrost moves these cards over, and we can kind of assess from there. So they have a Dracula. We know that it's not going to end up being an Apocalypse, so I think it's okay. I think we will be just fine. So let's play the Devil Dino, and then we'll kind of get a pulse on it. We'll see if maybe we need to shift it over. Maybe we need to kind of keep it in place. It just kind of depends. So they discarded a couple of cards. They have Hell Cow there, so they will be able to have a decent amount in that lane. we can either do an Arnold Zola, which would allow us to have two 13 power Devil Dinos, one here and one here, which I think is going to be the easiest way. Otherwise, we could play a couple of cards. We could make sure our Devil Dino got buffed all the way up. But I think shifting him is going to be the best way to kind of try and win both of these lanes. They don't know it, but we did draw into their Apocalypse, which is with a discard style deck list. I have to commend them on running a true like discard style list because it is a little bit clunkier than what it used to be. And so I still really like the discard archetype, but it's just a little bit more difficult to navigate. And so we will go ahead and rinse and repeat. We will take 1 cube victories and chip away at it a little bit at a time. But let's go ahead and jump into the next one. All right, so next up we have Neutral Milk. The first location is Death's Domain, so this is going to be a game where our Arnold Zola is going to be pretty important. It's going to be really good at pushing some power over here when we wouldn't be able to reach that location otherwise. And so let's go ahead and go with a Quinjet. They play a Quicksilver into Death's Domain. Interesting. I bet they're running Agatha. They have to be running Agatha. There's no other explanation, right? That has to be an Agatha play. Do they have one additional card than we do? So they have 5, we have 4. Yep, they have Agatha in hand. Knowing that Neutral Milk is not a bot, that's a very Agatha-like play. But we have to hope that she plays herself into Death's Domain. Let's not gamble on it. But let's go with a double collector play. We'll go with the double collector play. Next turn we can go with a double cable play. And then we'll save the last slot for a double Devil Dino. Then we can always do like a Moon Girl, which will duplicate the cards. I think that's going to be a decent shot. We can steal a few of their resources. Maybe we can steal into their Lady Sif, their wave, and they end up having to hold Agatha until the very end of the game. So there's a Sarah, so it's okay, not great. Sarah would actually allow us to reduce the cost of Nick Fury cards by 1 additional one. So we can get them all the way down to 4 cost, but I don't think it's worth necessarily running at this point. So being that late in the game and not having, I guess they didn't draw into a way to get rid of Agatha. That is the main drawback of the card, is that if you can't play her onto the board, if you can't get rid of her, you have to kind of rinse and repeat before the stakes of the cubes get too high. So we're chipping away at like wins little by little. Nothing huge, nothing major. Let's go for a really big, impactful game. That is what we want to see out of this list. All right, next up we have ABBB123. Starting off, we do have Agent 13, Cable, Sentinel, Nick Fury. We haven't seen Beast like at all. We've chipped away at 4 wins, played a couple of losses here and there. Nothing like too major. There's our Beast. We just had to talk about him to get him to kind of come out onto the board. I guess we could have played Agent 13 last turn, but we were kind of hoping for a collector here. Let's go with a Cable play. We do have the Devil Dino. If we can draw into our Arnold Zola, we'll be able to duplicate him across the board. If we draw into Angela, we'll be able to play a whole bunch of cards and then bounce them back in. It looks like they're probably running a Destroyer deck list, and so we have to be on the lookout for a potential Professor X play really at any point in time. So we're going to go ahead and play our Sentinel and our Agent 13. We will probably need to play Beast onto the board before turn 5, or else we run the risk of it pulling our entire Grand Central lane back into our hands. So I think this may be as good of a time as ever. We can pull the Green Goblin back into our hand, create a Bucky Barnes, which is an interesting one to take on. Let's go ahead and bounce our cards back into our hand. That will reduce their costs. We will also have a really big hand size. And then I think we play a Sentinel. We're not going to be able to reach the Green Goblin, are we? So we can't reach the Green Goblin. So is there any point in bouncing those cards anyways? We'll max out our hand before we get to the point of the Green Goblin. So maybe we do a Beast and a Sentinel into the Grand Central lane. We are going to probably hold our Agent 13 for now. We may not even play her back onto the board because she can't be played in Hellfire Club. Ideally, we are going to be able to draw into our Arnold Zola, but not if we continue to have a capped out hand size. And so if Grand Central pulls into like Nick Fury, we're going to be quickly out of luck. I think they probably play a Professor X here. And so that's going to be a 9, that's going to be a 12 power, like a 12 power decision or 12 power card. Let's go ahead and preemptively play our Devil Dino. That's going to be 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. It's going to be 15 power. Even if Devil Dino gets locked in there, we know that we have ways to keep that hand size above 12. And so let's go ahead and lock that in. We anticipate maybe a Destroyer play, something similar onto the board. And so I think we're actually going to be okay. So there's the Professor X that comes in. It's only 12 power, but that is absolutely fine. They do a leader, but their leader, or they pull their leader onto the board, but their leader's not going to be able to, their leader cannot save them here. If they do a destroyer here, this will turn into 6 power. This will push us up over that 6 power. If they do a destroyer here, we lose this lane. If they do it here, we win. Yeah. So I think we're just fine. I don't think there's an issue with the 4 cubes here. We're actually going to go back up to max hand size. Nick Fury is going to generate 3 additional cards for us. We didn't draw into our collector, but that's absolutely fine. We play the Nick Fury, which comes over the Winter Soldier's power level. I anticipate this being a destroyer. Yeah. Yep, pretty standard destroyer play line, and that is the downfall of a really common deck archetype, is that you can really anticipate those plays. Had we not known that Professor X was coming down here, yes, we had already planned on dropping Devil Dino there anyways, but had we not known that that was a possibility, it would have had that surprise factor. Once it loses that surprise factor, it's a lot harder to gain those 8 cube games, and so you have to get creative in the way that you can kind of surprise your opponent on the last turn by like changing up key pieces of a deck archetype. Otherwise, it's going to be a pretty slow grind. So we're going to take our 4 cubes, we will jump into a couple more and kind of keep pushing. All right, so next up we have Hungry Dodo. And before we get too far, ooh, Elysium is huge for us. We're going to go ahead and snap. Our Sentinel is going to be free, which is phenomenal. You can't beat free. But before we get too far into this game, I do want to give a couple of shout outs. So on our last couple of lunch live streams, we've had a couple of members support the channel in various ways. So we've had Pilk Enjoyer, who absolutely has found an enjoyment out of recently trolling the text-to-speech voice. So a couple days ago, it was a printer sound. Before that, it was a really like funny sprinkler sound. It's always really funny to come through. And so thank you, Pilk, for the support and for the laughs with the text-to-speech. And then we also had Alexander, who gifted a membership to another viewer. Alexander's already a member himself, and then he gifted that. He kind of forwarded a membership onto another user. And so thank you so much, Alex, for your generosity in helping support me and helping support the channel. So here we are not going to drop our beast yet. We're going to go ahead and just keep dropping free Sentinels onto the board because you can't beat free. We'll drop the free Sentinels. We can play them in the big house. We do have our Devil Dino that we'll be able to play onto the board. Potentially on 4, maybe we hold it until 5. It just depends on what we see. Actually, we can duplicate it, right? We can play our Moon Girl. We can play a Rock. Play a Sentinel as well, but I think we start running into the issue of having too many cards on the board. We're going to go with it anyways. We only have 6 turns. We might as well kind of fill up where we can, because this deck list, usually you don't fill up all of your spaces. So we might as well kind of push where we can when we can. And so the Sentinel's going to duplicate. The Devil Dino duplicates. They do have a Mr. Negative that went off on turn 3, which is kind of unfortunate. That means they're going to be able to get some decent upside. So maybe we want to kind of hold our Devil Dino. We can drop... we can't drop them both on the board on the same turn unless we do something like... If we do something like this, that leaves 3 spaces left. We can pull into this one, and this one. That brings him back down to 3 cost. We can do both him and our second Devil Dino on turn 6 as kind of like a surprise play. I am going to go ahead and play Sentinel into the big house. We don't have a better way to push power there, and Sentinel's free at this point. And so we may end up losing the big house. Maybe we can push to win Elysium and Subterranea. I do want to save those ongoing abilities because I know that like a Mr. Negative serotonin lists often run a rogue, and I don't want them to steal the Devil Dino ability if we can help it. So if we can kind of mitigate that chance, we're absolutely going to. And so, yeah, they have a huge big house location. Very, very big, very big house. We have so many cards that we can play. Let's go ahead and do a... we could do a never-ending beast loop here. So if they extend the game, we'll be able to play several more cards, continue buffing up our bishop. We do have the 2 Devil Dinos that we'll be able to play. Oh my gosh. So they play a rock into the big house. Very, very interesting. I don't know that we're going to be able to come up over that power, but we can sure give it a shot. We would have to play a lot more cards than they do to kind of overcome, plus to continue keeping up with their pace because they have the bishop there as well. This Iron Man lane is going to be an issue. And so I anticipate that they do it maybe a Mystique next turn. So they're going to have a really strong here in Elysium and Subterranea lane. Do we split our Devil Dino power, or do we lean into one direction? And then additionally to that, do we think they extend the game with magic here? So let's go with the Sentinel play here. We go with a free Beast, which will bounce 2 additional cards back into our hand. Then we can play the Devil Dino. We will have 1, 2, 3, so that puts us pretty close to hand size, or capping out that hand size. It also leaves us an additional space to kind of play some cards if they do extend the game. Ooh, so they double stack them into Elysium. Very interesting. Kind of unfortunate, actually. Had we stacked both of ours over into the Elysium lane, that would have been, kind of fine. But they also leave a space open for counterplay. They have played all of their cards in their hand, so it comes down to a top deck. So maybe they draw into a rock here. Maybe they draw into a rock and they can't really use this double inverted power. We are going to have 1 space to play, so we will be. We have so many Sentinels in our hands. We will be able to play 2 cards here, so we can buff this one up to 15, 17. So it's not quite going to be enough. I just have to hope that they don't have a huge rogue. If they top decked rogue, we're in trouble. Otherwise, I think we have an okay shot. A big power play here would absolutely crush us, though. We have a good shot at losing this. A very good shot at losing this. Let's go ahead and lock in the last play, though. I want to see if maybe we can overcome. We will have a max hand size at the end of this, and so it'll be a 17 power Devil Dino once all is said and done. Ooh, so they must have drawn into like a rock or some other small resource that they weren't able to come up over the 25 power here, even with a double Mr. Negative. So, oh my gosh, I cannot believe the Subterranea location came in absolutely critical for us. They had at least 2 rocks. I anticipate that they had at least 1 more. Absolutely huge. All right, so next up we have Wobbly Fish, and we do have Agent 13, but I don't think we play her just yet. We'd have Angela. I'd rather play cards into her lane and buff her up. And so I'm going to hold off for 1 turn. Ooh, we get the Super Flow, so we actually can play both of them this turn. And depending on what we draw in, I think Angela and Agent 13 is the play. We can do Angela, Agent 13, and then we know that these cards are going to move after turn 5. We don't know what this last location is, so I think right now I'm holding off. They've dropped 3 1-cost cards onto the board, so I'm curious what Wobbly Fish is running. We generate an Ant-Man from Agent 13, which is not terrible. It's not great, but it's not terrible either. We can get a Beast, so we're going to be able to bounce these cards back in. So let's go with a Cable play into a Beast. That way we can steal one of their cards. We pull these cards back into our hands, so we can buff Angela up further. And maybe we can steal another positive. Oh my gosh. Okay, never mind. I thought they forced us to draw into our own cards with the Maximus, but they zeroed it out, and so that's absolutely fine. We're okay with that. It is much less impactful than I thought it was going to be. So now we have Cable again. I guess we still have Cable. We can do Angela. We can do Cable. We can do Sentinel. We could also do a Devil Dino this turn. We know that we have their Enchantress. I think we're safe to Devil Dino. Yes, I want to steal another one of their cards with Cable, but I think we hold off 1 turn. I think we do a Devil Dino. We see what we draw into next turn. If it is something like our Arnhem Zola, maybe we avoid playing into the Superflow. If not, then maybe we start filling that up. We can do an Angela, Cable. We can really start to push and solidify our power position in that location. So they do a Doc Ock, which is really, really unfortunate. So it pulls into a lot of our resources. We play their Enchantress. The Cable now comes in, but it doesn't buff our Angela. We pull a Red Skull from them this time, which is not a bad card. Probably not going to end up dropping it this turn, but it's not a bad card nonetheless. Our Agent 13 now pulls into a Sentinel, which is huge. Arnhem Zola is going to be a little bit less impactful now into Hellfire Club. We do currently have the lead in Superflow, but we know that will likely change here shortly. And so let's do a couple of cards into the Strange Academy. We can do Sentinel, and that will fill up this Hellfire Club location. We'll still have pretty close to a max hand size after this. We can always do a Red Skull into Strange Academy because they're going to move their cards from here out after this turn, and so most likely they'll only have maybe 1 or so cards. And maybe we can swing this location away and kind of hope to still lock down this one or this one. So the Taskmaster copies the Doc Ock, which is a pretty decent Taskmaster. It's a pretty high power play, but we are going to be a little bit higher power than them, right? They would have to skip to come up over our power here. They do have us beaten here. Oh. So if they skip this turn, their Sunspot gains 6 power. That puts them at 23. So we have to keep our hand size at max. I really want to drop the Red Skull, but I can't afford to lose any power points on the Devil Dino. So I'm going to go with a 6 power play into Strange Academy and just hope that the direction they go with is skipping, that they don't have a large power push on this last turn. If they do, then they absolutely beat us. They win here. We are hoping that they try to skip to buff up their Sunspot, thinking that we will play cards or resources onto the board. Oh no. Oh no. What did they end up dropping? Oh no. Is it a Chavez? They drop a Chavez on us. Oh, it's a Cosmo. We had initiative, so we were able to retain the upside from our Sentinels. Had they had initiative, that Cosmo would have stopped them from coming back into our hand. We would have had 4 less power on the Devil Dino, losing the Hellfire Club by 1. Gosh, wobbly fish. That was an incredibly good game. There were so many potential loss lines that we had. The Doc Ock was huge. Luckily, we were able to pull into a couple of cards from that to kind of keep our upside going. But overall, very, very good game. And with that one, we are going to go ahead and end the video here. I hope that you guys enjoyed it. If you did, make sure to leave it a like and a comment down below. As always, this has been TLSG. Later, guys.